I decided I'm finally gonna live up to my username and make a tea related video. And so this is gonna be my beginner's guide to tea. And we're gonna start off with just all the basics. And so uh, different teas require different amount of times and different amounts of temperature. And so if you have something like black tea, it's gonna need, well, oftentimes you're gonna actually say 95 degrees. A lot of people are gonna say 100 degrees. But it's better at 95. It's a little bit better because all that extra heat, it kind of destroys some of the flavor, as far as I've heard. And then when it comes to green and white teas, basically white tea is just kind of green tea that's not been rolled. You kind of roll the tea leaves in a lot of cases, but with white tea you don't do that oftentimes. So it's kind of they're very similar. And white and green teas, they usually need about 80 degrees. Sometimes they need 70. And they need like 3 to 5 minutes. Black tea usually needs like 4 minutes. And so also you have something like, for example, herbal teas, they usually need 100 degrees. And you can usually just steep them for as long as you want. If you have like black teas or especially green teas and white teas, they get really bitter if you oversteep them. Like if you steep them for too long. Black teas do it less. Herbal teas, like there are some herbal teas like mint that can get bitter, but most of them just don't really care. Um, and so then I want to move on to the gear you're going to be using. And so if you have your teapot or your cup, uh, basically the best choices for those are going to be either glass or ceramic, and those have a couple of different properties. So if you have ceramic, you tend to have the pot or the cup as well. You tend to have it made of like a thicker layer of material. And now the reason for that is that if you have it made of glass, thin glass can actually take heat better than thick glass can. But with ceramic, you can make it really thick, and so it holds in the heat really well. But then the other side of that, the flip side of it is that you also need to preheat your ceramic teapot if you're using that. If you don't preheat it, then it's gonna take like 10 degrees Celsius. That's gonna be like 20 degrees Fahrenheit of the heat of the water you pour in, and then suddenly your tea is gonna be at too low of a temperature, and it's gonna taste like nothing. But then if you have a glass teapot, then it's gonna be like made of really thin material, and so you don't need to preheat it. But then also it's gonna lose heat a whole lot easier. And so the way you're gonna prevent that is you're gonna get like a some kind of piece of fabric maybe and wrap it around it. Or alternatively, you can just kind of only make teas in it that don't need to be steeped very long, and then if a short amount of time passes, then obviously it loses less heat just because of that. Um, Also, when it comes to kind of the shape of your teapot, basically you just need to make sure it's a teapot and not a coffee pot. A coffee pot is going to be very tall. And so the problem with that is that if you have kind of any kind of thermometer or tea strain or whatever, and you put it down there, it's not really going to reach the bottom before it's already so far down that you can't really reach it without the steam kind of scorching your hand. Not very fun. I've tried it. Don't try it. Get a proper teapot. A teapot is going to be a bit more like short. It's not going to be very tall. Um, Speaking of short and tall, uh, when it comes to cups, you know how coffee mugs, they tend to be like pretty tall, and then they tend to be more narrow. And the reason for that is that that shape holds in the heat a lot better. But if you have like a teacup, like a traditional Western teacup, they tend to be more short and more wide. And so that's gonna allow you to really take in the aroma of the tea. And also it's gonna actually be pretty practical for it to lose heat fast because the teapot, the idea is that the teapot kind of holds in the heat because it has a lid and stuff. And then your tea cools down to a comfy temperature, you drink it, and then you pour up another cup, and then the next cup is going to be hot again because it was kept hot inside of the teapot. Also, when it comes to pots, another pretty important part of them is like how do they pour, and the only real relationship I found when it comes to the spout is that the wider the spout is, or the bigger the spout is, the worse it pours. And if you have a very small spout, it usually makes like really clean stream. From my experience personally, I don't know that much about the physics. Just been my experience. Now, when it comes to how you're making the tea in terms of like, oh, should you use tea bags? Should you use like a strainer? And this and that. I would say strainers sometimes they're just hell to clean out, especially if you're making chamomile. Don't if you're making chamomile tea, genuinely just use paper tea bags. It's not worth it to use a strainer because like all those little petals get like really 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 stuck in there, and they take like a billion years to clean out. Like it's the worst. But other teas with other teas you're gonna get like better tea if you use a strainer because tea leaves they really like to expand, and so strainers are really like if you just want the best tea, don't really care about how much effort it takes to clean, then strainers are going to be the gold standard because they just allow the tea to expand the most, and then you can just lift the whole thing out of your like teapot, right? And then I want to say like tea bags, they're really great for convenience if you're just kind of lazy, but and they don't cost that much. But if you're like really, oh, the environment or whatever, or if you don't want to spend that extra money, then you can also just get one of those like egg thingies, and then you press on them, they open. I want to say I feel like they kind of aren't worth the cleanup. They're almost harder to clean than a strainer, and then they give you worse results. If you're gonna go that route, just get a strainer, honestly. And then prepackaged leaves, like prepackaged tea bags you buy at the store, those are never ever ever worth it. And the reason for that is, you look at them, you're like, oh, that's not very expensive. Here's the problem. The problem is that they obviously they have to pay to have a factory to to where they package all the stuff, and they have to pay to have them guide at the factory. They have to pay to ship both to and from the factory, and etc. etc. That adds a lot of cost, right? So then they say, okay, how can we still make this like a competitive price to the consumer? And the way they do that is that they put really dog shit tea leaves in there. Now, the reason why those tea leaves are dog shit is because they're like a teeny tiny size. Basically, the bigger leaves are, the better of a flavor you're gonna get. That's kind of a very broad like, there's more nuance to it, but that's like very broad strokes. They take like all the fannings from the fucking floor of wherever they're like drying tea leaves, sweep them up, put them in there, and it costs next to nothing. And also another reason why they do it like that is because it means that you're gonna get the flavor out of the leaves very quickly, right? It has a lot of surface area, so the flavor comes out very easily and quickly. But then that also means that all the bitter compounds come out very quickly, and so you're gonna get an oversteeped tea way faster. It's almost unavoidable to get a slightly oversteeped tea if you're gonna use the prepackaged stuff. So instead, what you should do is you should just go and buy like a proper bag of tea. It's gonna probably be cheaper per cup, honestly, than the tea bags you buy at the store, unless it's some like outrageously expensive tea. And it's gonna taste better. Genuinely, like because when people have to put the tea leaves in their own like strainer or whatever they put them, yeah, like consumers see the leaves and they would see it if they had some dog shit quality on their hands, right? Um, Another thing is also quality wise that you don't really want a lot of twigs in there. That's gonna be an indicator of low quality. I don't think they really hurt the tea, honestly. I mean, I don't really care if there are twigs, but generally, like higher quality tea has less twigs, and there's a bunch of like factors to it. Now, I want to say also a lot of tea, like when you go to a tea shop and you buy a tea, its price doesn't tell you how good the tea is. Like a more expensive tea isn't a better tea. It's just a tea where they make less of it. That's what it comes down to. If they make less of it, that's going to be the same amount of money chasing fewer goods, and so it's going to be more expensive. That's all it comes down to. And so The tastiest tea is going to be very individual, and you're going to have to find it yourself. And it might be something that costs like a very small amount of money, and then that's going to be great. And it oftentimes is because there are probably like more teas that cost a bit less. Um, and then when it comes to like tea grading in India and like Sri Lanka, countries around India in general, they use this tea grading system where they have all these letters, and this is for black tea specifically. And you're gonna see it says like S, F, T, G, F, O, P, blah blah blah. Basically, if you do see that, all you kind of need to know is the more letters there are, the higher the grade of the tea is. Except if there's a B in there, because the B is short of broken, that means they broke the leaves into smaller pieces. That's gonna obviously give you more surface area, and so it's gonna be more bitter. Um, but other than that, like the more letters you have, the better. And like the highest grade is like S, F, T, G, F, O, P, 1. That's like the highest you can go. Um, Now, also, do you even need like a pot to make tea? Now, you can easily just, if you have a cup with a lid, that's gonna be great, and you can make your tea in that. You can make it in a cup without a lid. With a lid, is gonna be preferable. Um, you don't really need anything fancy at all. I mean, you don't need one of those like kettles with all the fancy stuff. And in fact, if you get a kettle and you set it to 80 degrees Celsius, let's say, right? And then you pour up your water, what's going to happen is oftentimes, especially like I said, if you're going to use like a more heavy teapot or a more heavy cup, that's going to like take up like 10 degrees of your heat. And then bada bing, bada boom, now your water is kind of too cold actually. And so really the best solution, and also probably the cheapest one, is just gonna be to get like a separate thermometer. Just go buy a tea thermometer. It's not that expensive. And if you absolutely just can't afford to buy a tea thermometer, then what you do is you boil your water to 100 degrees, and then you pour it into a room temperature cup, right? It loses 10 degrees, and then now you know it's at 90. Then you pour it into your pot, then it loses another 10 degrees, now it's at 80. And then you can make green tea. So that's another way to control it. Um, Now, then you have something also that you're gonna stumble upon. It's called pu'er tea, and that's basically where they take the leaves, and then what they do is they ferment the leaves, and there are kind of different qualities of pu'er. And if you have a low quality pu'er on your hands, what you're gonna notice very quickly is that it tastes like fish. Like it tastes like fish soup. It's not very appealing at all. And like higher qualities of pu'er, they taste kind of earthy, but like in a really really tasty way. It's kind of individual if you like it or not, but like to me at least, it's really good. And you also like with pu'er, you need to rinse it with boiling water. Because otherwise, like there's always gonna be all these like byproducts from the fermentation left on the surface of the leaves, and you're gonna rinse those off. If you don't rinse them off, then it's gonna taste like dirt. Now, also, important thing to note: a lot of times when you make tea, if you make your tea at lower than 100 degrees Celsius, you can usually brew multiple cups or multiple pots from the same leaves. Now, there's like a caveat to that, which is you have to get the water out between the steeps. So you steep your leaves, right? And then you have to get all the kind of, the loose water out of it. So that's where like a tea egg comes in really useful. Like that's the one case where it's really good because you can just shake it vigorously in the sink, and then all the like excess water comes off. If you have all the excess water on the tea, then the water just oversteeps into really really bitter tea while it sits on the leaves. Then you put it back in your like new pot of hot water, and then all that bitterness just gets all in there, and it's gonna be disgusting. So if you want to re-steep your tea, it's actually really handy to have this tea eggs. Just something you can like where you can just shake the water out of it in the sink vigorously. Like anything that can do that, it's gonna work really well for you. That's a way to save money, and also some teas, like they kind of on the first steep they have one flavor, and then on the second steep like another flavor comes through, and then on the second or on the third as well, and then on each steep after the first one you might want to give it a little bit longer, like maybe 25% more time or something. Um, anyway, so that's gonna be my guide to make tea. And I hope you're gonna enjoy it. I hope you're gonna make some great tea after hearing about all this. And best of luck with your tea adventures. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.